folks. How's it going? Welcome to Serverless Craic. How's things?
Too bad. Drinking from a fire hose.
All good.
Stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
Very good. So we finished our series on the book, which was really interesting to reflect on, and we decided I suppose we've been deep in the AI sort of software development space now for a good while. So we thought we'd one of the things that we've discovered is that the whole approach of the value flywheel effect and serverless is really beneficial. I think when you're adopting some of the AI stuff that's coming out, I think we've been learning a lot over this past year, hence the fire hose, probably more than a year. So we figured we'd start to maybe talk about how the world of AI and GenAI is clashing into or crashing into the stuff that we've been talking about for the last couple of years.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
Interesting times.
Yeah, and I think we were all starting to see that the flywheel applies to this new world we're rapidly entering into, right? So having clarity of purpose is really important. Having an environment that's set up for success is really important. Understanding what your next best action is really important. And most importantly, building solutions that last and have long term value is going to be critical as we all go headlong into embracing AI for everything, right?
Yeah. I think it's like one of those things we always say is you want to move fast with anything. Like you have to set up like if you're going to move fast in a particular direction, you want to kind of make sure that direction is probably the right direction, right? Um, you know. So yeah, there's a lot there's a lot to unpack with it for sure.
It's going to be fun. Yeah, so I think there's a lot. There's an ocean of stuff to talk about. So let's start off handy. We figured we'd talk about some AI myths. There's a lot of conversations about AI at the minute and software development. And
Mm.
so the intro of AI and the value flywheel effect. Let's talk about. We've got 6 AI myths that we want to discuss. I think we've been discussing them a lot. So let's go through them for the crack. Maybe good fun.
Yeah.
Again, this will probably be completely out of date by the time you listen to it. It's changing that fast. So the first myth is software engineering is dead.
Yeah.
Hope not. I certainly something I hear a lot of engineers that I like coding. I still want to code. It's I've been saying for a long, long time. Um, there's coders and there's software engineers.
Yeah.
When you're a software engineer, you're paid to solve a problem. You're given a problem, and the way you solve that is with software. Coders just write code all day. I always liked the idea of a software engineer. You're sitting solving a business problem. It's you know what I mean. So I think that is a really important mindset to be in. You're not paid to write code, paid to solve problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess one of the things, even probably one of the things to say up front before anything is, in our industry, particularly in recent time, you've got to be really comfortable with change, and you've got to accept the fact that things are changing, things are moving. You've got to move with the times and you have to adapt. It's not to say, in my head, it's not to say that you won't code, but the why you're coding or what you're coding, it's going to change,
Yeah.
and you got to move with it. So I don't, to your point, I agree on the engineering side. I kind of feel like even if you look at general trends over the last sort of 15, 20 years and how much has shifted left into that developer space anyway, everything has shifted left. The industry's just been consolidating for so long, and this is just another kind of wave of consolidation. So I think you have to become, I think you become more expert in a lot of things. Like this year, I've become way more, the last sort of year and a half in terms of what I've been doing, I've become way more interested in things like observability and how do you instrument systems and what does good instrumentation look like. But I think this sort of helps with barriers to entry and, it helps you become more expert. And I think it affords you an ability to kind of become more expert, in my opinion.
Mm.
Yeah. And I do think it's a lot of the barriers to doing world class software engineering are being removed.
Yeah.
The access to information has never been better. The AI capabilities and toolings and IDEs have never been better to help you add observability, add more comprehensive tests, add more resiliency and add in your sort of chaos engineering practices and patterns. So I think, software engineering is not dead. It is going to be more valuable than ever. And I
Mm.
think the barriers to applying rigor and discipline to software engineering to your solutions is easier now than ever because the tools make it easier. So
Mm.
I think it's an interesting time. But to your point, Mike, I think having that growth mindset is going to be critical. You got to keep
Mm.
learning because this stuff is changing rapidly.
The other thing too is like what you got to realize is all the bad mistakes of the last 50 years aren't going away. Like we've still got shit tons of bad systems out in the wild, and even AIs will have trouble with that sort of thing. So you got to be nimble. You got to think on your feet. You still got to be able to, you've got to be able to, solve problems, problem solve,
Mm.
and come up with, solutions to certain things. I think just the problems are going to change. They're just going to be different problems.
Yeah.
Mm.
And as you're leveraging the AI tools and the frameworks, and as they get more agentic and there's more swarms of agents, you still need to be able to ask them for good software solutions. You
Mm.
still need to be able to craft them into something that is resilient and performant and reliable and cost optimized. So that's all software engineering. That's all it's
Mm.
just a different abstraction layer that you're interacting with. So you're going to need to have all the software engineering skills to make sure that anything you deliver is good quality.
I mean,
Plus,
yeah,
plus these models have been trained on all the software engineering literature, so you need to talk the language, think in the concepts and think about the abstraction layers.
And
goes
one
back to
of
what we are talking about in the book. Like about mapping. Do you do your situational awareness and you map all your situational awareness? I recently went to a talk within the company or whatever, and the guy who just changed. Like he got me thinking very differently about the problem space has changed very rapidly. Like something we would have thought about was normal 3 months ago is now we got to be thinking about this very different. There's different needs. There's different, you know, everything has just changed so quick. So even that situational awareness and stuff, like what space you need to broaden your horizons a wee bit more.
yeah,
There's
Mm.
people have different needs now with this stuff,
Mm.
which is kind of interesting.
Absolutely. It's fascinating. I always
Mm,
said to myself, we get on to the next myth now, but one thing I remember reading this in a book when I was probably a teenager. If you want to be a software engineer, there's like the learning curve, and you have to accept that you'll always be on the steep side of the learning curve.
yeah,
yeah.
Like that's the job. So the
Mm,
second myth, probably says rightly, is my skills will become irrelevant. I
yeah.
don't want to take, my job will go away. Um, I think that's a massive myth.
yeah.
Um, it's like the skills you don't want to be doing will go away. Writing maybe boring documentation, certain types of documentation, doing very rote refactorings, like bumping something up a version. Some things like that are quite laborious will go away. But there's some skills that you absolutely need.
Yeah. And
Mm.
it's back to what we talked about earlier around understanding your purpose and understanding the value you deliver. You need to be moving up the value chain. So if your job isn't delivering anything of value, then yes, you may be at risk from this, but you got to make sure that what you're doing is actually solving real problems and addressing real user needs, and that you're constantly learning and evolving as that changes. And if you have that sort of approach, then it won't take your job because you'll have skills and you'll be able to adapt and improve and make sure that you are delivering value and actually solving real problems for people.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
this one's tricky. I think it goes back to what we were just saying. I think this one you can go deep on this one, right? I don't want to go deep on it. But you'll hear people who say, "Oh, well, actually, we need people who've just come up with AI, and these are your AI native or your AI natural kind of engineers. They just do AI. And then there's people like us who really come up with the industry itself. Um, and I kind of feel like there's advantages in both. Like so. For me, it's more. I feel like. I feel like even if you think about like a graduate or a student today, you have so much benefit in terms of how these things work. If there's a problem in these sorts of things, where would you even start? Even how do you direct those? How would you direct an agent on a solution? How would you provide like the context
Yeah.
to a solution? There's and even I don't know if you've ever done it. Have you ever tried to explain your job to somebody who has no idea about your job? It's the
Yeah.
hard you only realize how much experience you have until you actually attempt that
Yeah.
task. So so I wouldn't be I still feel like the skills are highly relevant. I just feel like we have to learn how to leverage them in different ways. if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
and it's never been a better time to be an engineer because I fancy looking at this framework or the new React thing or Next.js come out. I haven't tried that before.
Um,
With the help of the co-pilots and the AI assistants and the learning models and notebook LMs and other things, you can rapidly become very proficient in a brand new technology that the burden would have been too high to embrace before. It would have taken you too long to read the docs and
Barriers to
explore and
entry are
experiment,
closed.
right?
yeah, I mean, the main issue I have had is just the information overload.
Yeah.
I think that is definitely something where you really gotta. I mean, I was talking to a group of engineers today, and the one thing I said is like, try one thing a day. Like, try not to overwhelm
Yeah.
yourself.
Mm.
Pick one thing, and even if it's 20 minutes, um, and kind of think about how do you think
Yeah.
about it different.
And,
You know, I
and
Well
thought,
said. It's an evolution. It's an evolution of the skills. And if you don't want to evolve what you do, if you don't want to evolve your skill,
you're stuck.
you're stuck, you know. And that's always been the same. I remember working with people in my 20s, and they'd say, I say, what do you do? And they say, I run the script every day. All
Mm,
right.
yeah,
What does the script do? I don't know. You
yeah.
yeah.
run that every day? Yeah. What
But
happens if it breaks? Oh, I call someone. And you're thinking,
yeah.
well, that's not going to last.
But
And it doesn't.
on the flip side of that, though, domain expertise is going to be in high demand. If you
Yes.
understand your domain, if you understand how things operate within your sphere of influence, that expertise is gold. But that's really good for context for anything that the AI want to do. So I think domain expertise isn't going to go away, and that's going to be highly valuable.
It's funny you say that. The like I mean we would use a lot of the domain-driven design. And I have found that if you're doing a proper domain-driven design system, everything named properly and laid out properly, the model just eats that up. It's
Oh yeah,
just so easy for it to understand. So it's like the resurgence of domain-driven design. So you're right about domain knowledge and
Do you
critical
think?
thinking as well. Like,
yeah,
Do you think? Even just thinking about in this sort of conversation, like back in the day when we were kind of doing some of the wordly maps, you would have spotted something and maybe it was in custom and it was like a custom skill set to that organization. But now with the emergence of this stuff, is that such an issue? Like when we would have promoted, like a move more towards commodity because then you open up more access to more skilled engineers. You reduce the cost of kind of getting
yeah.
those skills in house. So then you kind of wonder, does that even flip that sort of thing on
It
its head?
does.
So it's, can you
what's
afford
the
to have more
investment?
nuance and more
It's the
specialization in
investment.
house?
I would say, if you have a custom component, even if you're invested in AI to maintain it and do it, like I mean, so that's always the thing about custom. It's the bigger investment for what you get. Now, it could actually do the job a lot better than an
Hmm.
off-the-shelf thing, but the question was never you have to move it. It was always, does this need to be here? And
Yeah.
sometimes the answer is yes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I,
Rarely,
but,
but
but
you
I
know what I
do
mean.
think that our historical sort of internal calculation would have been, oh, you've built a custom database, or why would you use a cloud or database? Some of those conversations will be different now because the skills and the knowledge and the AI is much better at helping helping you maintain that custom burden, right, or
Yeah.
help you operate that custom burden. So the calculations are slightly skewed a little bit now. That when traditionally would have been, hey, evolve it to serverless, evolve it onto a SaaS
Yeah.
offering or a product.
So
That's
you're probably looking at a few more dimensions in your decision making
100%.
Yeah,
potentially.
that's true. All right, so that actually probably leads nicely on to myth three. The quality is not good enough. The models aren't very good. The output, it's rubbish. It's just AI slop. Um, which sometimes is true, but as we all know, the models are evolving at a rate of knots.
Yeah,
And we keep reminding people that these tools today are the worst that they will ever be,
yeah. We're
which
we're all
scares people.
we're all guilty of this, a little bit of dismissing it as, oh, it's never going to work, or it's not good enough. But the pace of evolution, the investment in these models, the breakthroughs and model capabilities and outputs over the last 3 months has been significant. So it is, they're getting good very rapidly at multiple different things.
Well, I have a question for you too on this one. Is like there's a thing I'm wrestling with in my head on this is like so again coming from current industry, we would typically scale around like you know um standards or like good practice. right? And you'd say, right, this is kind of in order to kind of work in big groups and work across multiple squads, we kind of embrace these coding standards and we work to this level. So everything should have a test or working test, whatever. And you can come up with these constraints, right? And you can give those constraints to say conceivably like an agent. You can constrain the agent to say work within these constraints and build outputs or outcomes that are the same as say like a human engineer or one of our high performing engineers or high performing engineering team. But is the role of the engineer in future to be okay, how do you move beyond those constraints? You know what I mean? So like are there benefits to the polyglot? Would you see the emergence of polyglots or do you get more options? I always kind of like what Adrian Cockcroft said about serverless is it's constrained, but you have all the tools and things to assemble it in whatever way you need to solve the problem. But are you giving yourself a bigger, is the role of the engineer here to broaden that, factor more things in? Are you, you know, how do you how do you evolve? How do you take advantage of this stuff? I think it's different, so you can go two directions on this. I don't know what the right one is.
I think there's still cognitive overhead of having too many options. So I think we've constrained ourselves that this is our tech stack of choice. These are our ways of working. This is our process and practices, so that you can have a really efficient, predictable, ways of working, and you can get value at the other end rapidly, but in a predictable sort of manner. The more options we give to these agents, the more complexity there is. There's more risk. There's more chance of things going wrong. So I think there's probably
even,
there's a lot of different factors at play.
but even that's kind of again, that's the role of engineering here, to say, well, actually, how am I constraining these things? How do I still think about quality? Like what decisions, how how aggressive do we want to go here?
And that's it. Like complexity is nature's way of punishing orgs who can't make decisions. So
Yeah.
we're going to have to make a lot more decisions about, well, what model do you want to use? What tool do you want to use? What tools do you want to give it access to?
So maybe the idea is, it is a noble goal to work towards having these things produce the same level of quality as your top engineer to start with, and then you can get more ambitious over time as you get more comfortable or you
But
get
I,
more
but I would
experience.
say a standard, it's not always the reason why you have a standard, it's not always to suit the skill set of the engineer. There's also operational costs,
Yeah.
Yeah.
compatibility, compliance. There's a whole bunch of other things come into play when using standards. So that the engineer skill is only one thing, and that's important. If people don't know, if someone can't understand something, it's not very good.
Mm.
So standard helps that, but I think there's a lot of operational concerns.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
I
remember
mean,
the AI, it might just generate the software. It doesn't run it.
But
Well, not yet.
ultimately, the
it's a good shout.
the teams have to be able to own these solutions and stand over them as they go through your pathway to production. So
Mhm.
the more you keep it in line with what you give your software engineer the people,
Mm.
the easier it is for them to review it, understand it, stand over it, understand how it's going to react in production from real systems, and know what the failure modes are, and know what the runbooks and the playbooks look like, and know how to
Yep.
support it for a very
Yeah,
long time. So I think
yeah,
those that context you feed it in, those standards, that rules of the road that you're going to align with for the agent produced solution. It's not just for the agents; it's for the humans as well.
Yeah, big time. So probably leads us on to the next myth, number four. I think this is a good one. The model understands the problem.
Hmm.
I think this one's interesting. People will talk about the model as if almost like talking to another person. Well, I asked it this and it said that, and it's advised me to do this. And again, the thing, I mean, like LLMs are basically text prediction systems. You know what I mean? They predict the next best word. Uh, they don't understand language, So I think there is no comprehension. They're just finding patterns. So I think it's going to take people a while to figure that out.
yeah. I I think yeah. I mean, like if we're being honest, I think even today, they're getting really good. Some of these models and stuff, but you can take one look at one of these documents and see. Again, maybe I'll get proven wrong here, but but you can spot like a generated doc, right? And
Yeah.
you probably like you've seen some generated, and you can spot the generated code.
Yeah.
And as an experienced person, it's you would argue that it's maybe you wouldn't have done. You've got your own personal preferences, you've got your own kind of things. You It's always lacking maybe that 20-30%, in terms of me putting it forward as my own thing. I always you'd always redo it. So, but you can, if you spend time on the context and you spend time, there's certain things there we would leverage, certain frameworks. They can kind of give you a bump up,
Yep.
like the BMAT stuff is one example, or, some of these agentic based things, you get a bump up, and I think you can really get that even closer and closer. And, you can get it to the point where it adheres to your own kind of preferences and things. So I think this is a trick, a hard one.
I think you're right about the context. You have to be very careful given the right amount of context. And also the phrase understands the problem. Go back to the earlier one. A big part of software engineering is actually trying to work out what the problem is and
Right.
really understanding the problem and the things that you have to solve, because that's not always clear. What I've found is sometimes before you even get to solving the problem, the tools can help you
Yep.
flesh it out. And again, it's not that they're thinking about what you've said and think, oh, I think it's this. It's they're like, right, there's a pattern. I'm matching other things. And it might throw in like, have you thought about performance? Have you
Yep.
thought about security? So it'll throw back things. And you need to, as the human, go, right, well, that's relevant and that's not relevant. So there's definitely a part of being
Yeah.
very hard on the model when it comes back. And
Yeah,
and,
and
and
I
it's
think
not a person, you know?
this is where your critical thinking and iterating it can massively accelerate you getting to a good document, solution, pattern, whatever. But you got to use it in the right way, and you can't just accept it blindly. You really need to understand what you're looking for, what context you want to give it, and what good looks like. Because it's really easy to create slop and you can tell. But I think over time you can codify some of your rules of documentation, rules of code into these models, so that they are very hard to differentiate between a human or AI with this.
Yeah.
Mm.
Still, I think it's keep it small. Like if you're writing an RFC, or you're writing you're trying to think through like some sort of architecture type decision, try and keep it small. Like I hate when you ever get known to run off and they start giving you like a rollout plan and stuff at the end, and here you go, and there's like a sick, oh shit, like my context was all wrong. I didn't keep it small enough. I just want to keep to this, within this boundary,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and so yeah,
I do think the emergence of skills is starting to codify some of this stuff into more bite-sized sort of capabilities. So, picking the right skill for the thing you're doing at that particular point in time makes it more concise and more constrained to a particular concept or pattern or whatever, right? So, again, this one is rapidly evolving. They are starting to be better at understanding pattern matching, whatever. They're more powerful. They're more able to get you what you need. But yeah, you just need to be constantly
skills is a good point. Skills, like one of the habits I've developed over the last sort of number of months is if I'm doing something repeatable, I'll capture
Yep.
the prompts in the form of a skill, and
Yep.
then you build up these wee groups of skills, and then even some of your approaches to work, you'll assemble like
Yep.
groups of skills next. So skill patterns is actually quite useful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. But there's a whole art form, the defining the problem properly,
Yep.
using the right language. So I think so the model does not understand the problem, you're still in control.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't solve for you need to bring all the right stakeholders along on the journey, right? You still
Oh
need to
yeah.
do the hard yards with all the users, understanding their needs, bringing all the different stakeholders through the problem sort of discovery and solutioning and even the delivery of it, right? So there's a lot of people stuff that needs to happen regardless of who's building the solution.
Yep. Very good. All right. So myth 5, from a software engineering perspective, I'll be forced to use it. Um, I have spoke to a few engineers who are basically saying, I don't like AI, I don't agree with it, and I don't ever want to use it. And I do think if your process or your workflow is AI, you have a problem. You know what I mean? you should be able to describe your workflow, your process, your working environment without, saying it's AI. There needs to be a flow of how things get done.
Mm. Yeah, I think in most cases that's probably just again it's maybe a lack of understand. Well, maybe that's being unfair, but they've maybe seen it being misused, or they've seen it
Mm.
being used in ways that like vibe coding went mad there for like and any like if you're an engineer in charge of a financial system, for example, and you're being told to vibe code, absolutely you're going to be going no. I think I'll pass, thanks. So, but it's different in those contexts. It's different. You got to be more controlled. You got to be more thoughtful about your setup.
Mm.
You got to have humans in the loop. You got to own responsibility for you know
Mm.
who did what, and
And you're
then
right
what
about
moves were.
you're right about responsibility. And again, the thing you need to be really careful of, if your process is just, I'm going to give the AI a requirement and just let it figure it all out, you need to give it access to all of the things. If
Yeah,
you give your AI access to all the things and don't create any boundaries, then you're going to have a huge security problem because a lot of it's the keys to the kingdom. Well, I think when LLMs first became sort of popular about 3 years ago, OWASP brought out their LLM top 10, and I think front and center was kind of the keys to the kingdom. If you give it was like agency, I can't remember the exact phrase. I think it was excessive privileges.
Excessive
If you
agency.
give your, was that it? Was that it?
Yeah.
Excessive privileges. If you give your agent access to everything, good luck. You know what I mean? So that's why I think you need, remember, a workflow or a process is a way of just creating boundaries as the work flows along.
mm. I mean,
And
yeah, I 100% agree. I think a good engineer understands their pathway to production and understands all the kind of decisions on that pathway. And even if you talk about it, like a lot of developers will be on the bike with Cloud Code or Cursor, and they've got like Cursor agent and agent mode, and like even if you look at some of these, agent-based frameworks or some of these skill-based libraries, who owns those libraries and what prompts are in those
you need to be
skills?
really careful.
Like so, the supply chain sort of tech factor there is actually
Yeah, through the
enormous.
roof.
So as an organization, there's certainly things there you got to look at, and definitely as an engineer, you got to be really careful about like what you're running on your machine, right?
Effectively a sandbox. What I find, a lot of the agents I work with, I do it in the command line. So I often create a folder as the boundary, and that folder, I'll say, right, this we're going to work in this folder. So
Yeah.
that's where our context is going to be, and really keep an eye on any kind of calls. And
Yeah.
just again, don't give it any excessive privileges. But I think you have to do that.
But I think you'll be forced to use it. It's not so much you'll be forced to use it. You'll be forced to understand it. You need to
Yeah.
understand the capabilities. You need to understand what it's good for in your environment, your ecosystem, your environment, where those threats are, what the security implications are. We've always been big proponents of threat modeling. I think doing threat modeling for introducing any of these capabilities is a very worthwhile endeavor for yourself or your organization, even if you're experimenting with some of the more powerful agentic frameworks at home on your own device.
Mm.
Understanding that threat landscape is going to be a critical skill for the AI era. So
Mm.
it's well worth spending some time thinking before you install that npm package from some random developer on some forum. What does it mean? What does it mean for you? What are the threats
Here's
that you just expose yourself to?
here's a question for you. I mean, and some companies will just ban Gen AI and say we're not using whatever model. Do you think a company may evolve in the future? Here's a bet that will say we are writing software and we don't use any AI tools. We're going to do it the traditional way. We're going to use whatever. We're going to really get into, craft and code, and it's going to be sort of we're not going to do any of that. It could be a way to sort of attract engineers who just want to write software the traditional way. I think that's going to emerge.
I think it's going to be very hard for them to compete
It
with
will.
the velocity of teams who are embracing these tools, techniques, processes, practices in a responsible way.
Yeah.
I think we're already seeing teams who can embrace this stuff properly with the proper guardrails and the proper methodologies can go really quickly and deliver massive
Yeah.
amounts of value.
I think there's probably more inclination towards the agent only driven company, right?
That's already happened.
Like Claudebot or Claude, what was the social network?
Open Claw's now being rebranded too, right?
OpenClaw,
Movie marker with all his Mac Minis with armies of agents creating
Yeah,
havoc.
I
absolutely.
think it's an interesting one, but again, we talked about it at the start, in terms of like just changing scope of thought, like the whole notion of sovereignty, and you probably will see things emerge where people don't want AIs ingesting certain things like copyright or
Yep.
creatives or those sorts, and I think that's an interesting industry for sure. Like
Yeah.
that'll emerge out,
Well,
and
sovereignty is a brand new landscape.
Yeah.
I know
yeah,
Simon Wardley talks about that a lot, the whole idea of digital sovereignty. It's
Yeah.
very
I
interesting.
think the bigger challenge maybe not you'll be forced to use it is I can't use it, or we don't have the right ecosystem to enable these tools or capabilities, or we haven't there's certain things that we haven't put in place to make it easy for teams to adopt it, or we don't know what the cost will be. We can't afford it, we can't get it through budgeting. So there could be a number of factors where engineers and teams are clamoring for some of the more advanced capabilities, but they can't get access to it.
I
Cost is
think
going to be a factor. There'll be some companies who will bring in a tool and they'll get an unbelievable bill, and
Yeah.
the CFO will be like, "What?"
So it's
So that's going
very,
to be
very,
that's
very
going to
much
be a
back to
factor.
the early days of cloud, right? Where
Yep.
somebody left something running, pinging 100,000 times a minute, whatever, and ran up a massive bill.
the
Those
light
same
bill.
sort of horror stories will emerge from this era.
And I think the probably only thing preventing a lot of them horror stories is the fact that you do have engineers who maybe are taking a wee bit of, you know, being a wee bit cautious about what they're at. But as soon as you open, again, it's a containment as an organizational problem. Or, we talk about like the next best action in the book, but how do you enable your organization for this stuff in a safe way? How do you contain these agents in a way that they can't do,
Yeah.
if they do go rogue? It's you've got mitigations.
Yeah, that's fun. All right,
It's
and then our final myth 6, is we'll need less engineers.
Mm,
Um, and Mike, as you rightly started pointing out a few months ago, Jevons paradox, or
Evans.
Jevons paradox.
yeah.
Do you want to explain that?
It's I think the paradox in itself. You should watch that with YouTube. There's a YouTube we can link to, but I think back in the day there was some sort of paradox where they said if we can reduce what was it, something about like making a more coal efficient engine, and we'll reduce our dependency on coal. But in actual fact, the process of making the engines more efficient meant that there was more demand, and they actually drove up the
Yeah.
demand for the coal. It's the same way here. Like I think Mark, you said at the start in a nice way. You're probably going to see an explosion in the digital economy. Like
Yeah.
you're going to be doing more with less, and there's going to be more demand for it. Like so in the past, if you were able to knock out like you know 5 apps, maybe you're going to branch out and do maybe more features or more capabilities and have 15 apps, but you've still got to be able to deal with all that. And I think it's a bigger shift left as well. So in
Mm,
any way there'd be more demand for engineering as this all plays
I think
out.
so.
Even in
I
the go ahead.
No, I agree totally. I think it's the barriers to creation has been again lowered again another level. The cloud and serverless, lowered barriers for a lot of different people to create these solutions. I think AI really just removed the final sort of couple of barriers to normal people, everybody being able to create compelling, well crafted solutions that are delivering real value. But I think once they actually get adoption and start to make changes to it and start monetizing some of these things, software engineering will kick back in again around, hey, well, how do you make it perform, and how do you make it scale, and how do you make it reliable, and how do you make it sustainable, and how can you make it easy so that we don't break everything every time we make a change. That all leads back to good software engineering. So there's going to be an explosion of the AI aided or crafted or solutions, but you're going to need software engineering and software engineers to help make them work sustainably, reliably for the longer term. So
Yeah,
I don't think I think there's going to be an explosion of the need for good software engineers.
for sure. Well, that's a good place to finish up on. So that's the crack. So hopefully that's interesting. I mean, we have a bunch of more stuff to explore around kind of AI and the value flywheel effect. It's certainly an exciting time, but lots to get your head around. And again, it's changing about a mile a minute.
Yep.
So, but we'll continue to post stuff up on the serversize.com on our YouTube channel, and give us a click on LinkedIn as well. Thanks very much, and
Thanks, everyone.
interested to hear feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, bro.
Bye.